Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. I am your host, Matt Tardio. Today, we're going to take a look at what the heck is going on in the world. It's getting kind of crazy out there. We've got, how do I want to say, a lot of issues that are currently taking place, and they're not what I would like to discuss as good things. First thing that we're going to end up talking about is going to be the silver market and why the price of silver is crashing so freaking hard right now and what it has to do with Iran, Russia, and China. Now, while the official title that is up on here is Iran's president says his country is at full-scale war with the West, right? So Iran pretty much just declared that they're at war with the West. Let's be perfectly honest here. That's no surprise to anybody. But what's actually happening behind the scenes, what's really ended up taking place, is we have China that's declared a war on the US dollar. And all of that's going to be kicking in starting on January 1st. And I'm going to explain why. I'm also going to explain why all of this actually ties into the war inside of Ukraine and what we are actually hearing back over here in the United States. So why is it the United States government is focused so hard on the Somali fraud? Why is all of that being pushed so freaking hard to you? Meanwhile, we are about to bomb the crap out of Venezuela. Iran's about to bomb the crap out of freaking Israel. And Russia and Ukraine are kind of nearing a little peace deal. Well, let's take a look at everything that's happening. Now, most of you guys can actually reference this here in your own home state. You guys don't know, oil prices are pretty dang low right now. You're sitting about like $57 a barrel. And that's a pretty big deal, right? Especially for us back over here inside of the United States. We have really low oil prices, $57 a barrel. Well, it's hurting our oil and gas industry pretty hard because they can barely stay afloat with prices that cheap. They're cutting corners and doing everything. It's really, really bad. However, what it does do is it ends up hurting Russia's economy. And this is kind of what forced Zelensky and Putin to come to the table. Well, it's what forces Putin to come to the table, right? Having record low oil prices. It's so bad, actually, that Putin even came out and said that he would provide free, if not like super cheap energy over to Ukraine should Ukraine decide to pull out of the Donbass and stop fighting them. That is pretty interesting when you think about it. Why would Putin want to do that? Why would he want to provide free energy to them? Well, 30% of Russia's GDP ends up coming from their oil exports. 30%. That is a ginormous amount of what ends up coming out of there. And you know, a lot of people, when we ended up looking at what was going on at the beginning of the year during the Trump presidency, I don't think a lot of people really quite understood. I know a lot of you guys did if you guys have been sticking around here for a while. All right. So we have Russia, okay, that's right up over here. It's a freaking huge country, right? And they've got a bunch of oil exports that end up coming out and into the Black Sea. They travel down through Turkey, through these little straits down here, and then they go up over to Egypt. They end up going through the Suez Canal and dumping themselves up over into the Red Sea. While the Houthis had all of that closed down, Russia was able to send their oil through the Red Sea, no problem. The Houthis weren't attacking them. Why? Because the Houthis over inside Yemen are controlled by Iran. So Russia was able during this whole time to kind of skirt and go around sanctions by sending all of their oil through the Red Sea. That's why when Trump came into office, you saw the U.S. military, and one of like our first orders of business was bombing the living hell out of Iran in order to get the Red Sea reopened. Why? Because that affects the global economy, right? The EU lost a buttload of money because of this, because everybody else, if you weren't Russian, pretty much if you weren't Russian, you had to sail your happy butt all the way around Africa, fight with frickin', Somali pirates down here and whatnot, just to get whatever goods it was that you had up over in Asia. But the other big thing was it undercut everybody on the oil market. It undercut everybody on the oil market. So Russia was able to take and send all of their oil through here. No problem. And where were they offloading it? Well, India is their number one buyer, but also China and the rest of the Asian market. And this is how Russian economy ended up staying afloat, all right? By being able to do that, they're able to fund the war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why do I care about this? Why do I care about silver? Why should you care about it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very big deal. There's rumors of like tens, dozens of ounces of silver going into a Tomahawk cruise missile, but nobody really knows. But the one thing that we do know for damn sure, the one thing that we know for absolutely sure is the amount of silver that's on the planet is finite and is disappearing rapidly. And if we want to continue to build those weapons, guess what we got to do? Well, we got to be able to have silver to put into those weapons. If Ukraine wants bombs, if they want everything in order to attack Russia with and fight for their own land, guess what they need? Nailed it. Silver. Guess what China did starting on January 1st of this year? Now, China, for those of you who do not know, is the world's largest, and I mean the largest, producer and exporter of silver. They're also one of the largest consumers due to their solar panel industry, cheap labor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But back in August, the U.S. ended up putting on the short list for critical minerals. In November, it ended up getting posted underneath the Trump administration, so silver's listed as a critical mineral. Guess what China did? China, back then, ended up stating, starting on January 1st of 2026, that silver was going to face massive restrictions when it ends up going into their exports. And that is a very big deal. Now, you can sit back and you can look and you can say, well, the U.S. has plenty underneath its soil. Banks like JP Morgan just acquired 750 million ounces, allegedly, through buying all this paper and everything else. But the big issue, ladies and gentlemen, isn't how much silver we think we have. It's what's actually on the market to be able to distribute. This actually pushed Elon Musk this weekend, believe it or not. Not making this crap up. Elon Musk came out over the weekend. Oh, come on, open up so I can show people. Elon Musk came out this weekend and he actually quoted on silver and he said, this is not good. This man right here, Elon Musk, ended up putting out a tweet saying, this is not good. If Elon's saying that this is not good when it goes to the Chinese exports, what do you think he's talking about? Because guess who the number 2 exporter is, by the way? That would be Mexico. And we're not doing so good with them right now either. All right. Now, why? What does this signal to the U.S. economy? Well, I ended up laying this out and doing all the math. And I ended up writing about it not that long ago. I can open it up and I can show it to you guys. And it all does tie back into Venezuela and it all ends up tying back into Iran. But this is the big thing that ended up happening over the weekend. I want to zoom in on this to explain this to you guys. All right. Here we have in December, 63 million ounces of silver were delivered out of COMEX's registered 113 million ounces. You're looking at roughly 56. I just call it 60%. So 60% of what's available for the U.S. market for sale, for delivery, ended up getting ripped out of the freaking vaults over December. That leaves approximately 50 million ounces. Now we have what's called over 30 million ounces of eligible silver. And the way I want you guys to picture this is banks like JP Morgan are holding on to the physical metal itself. They take it over to COMEX, who then COMEX will certify it, inventory it, whatever, and say that these bars meet this international standard for sale. And then it becomes eligible for sale. But those banks, those people that actually hold those 300 plus million ounces have to actually want to sell it. That's what actually has to happen. And so the reality of the matter right now is that until further notice, there's about 50 million ounces that are sitting in there. And the way they end up trading all of this stuff on the market is via paper contracts. And so the paper ends up trading 2-3 months in advance, right? People say in the future, this is why it's called silver futures when you look at it. Summary, silver futures. In the future, silver is going to be trading at this dollar amount, 71.22. That's how the United States does business. Well, right now, with those 50 million ounces that are actually in our vaults, there's well over 300 claims per ounce of silver that people have already bought these contracts. And so what they have been doing since the late 2000s, right? 2008, 2009, when everything kind of crashed, is they have been basically shorting these stocks to keep the price. And so they take them, they buy them, they get them up to a certain place, and then they dump it all. And then they end up buying back in and making money on it. And they've just been doing this thing over and over and over. If you guys end up going to take a look at platinum, it was the same thing with platinum. All right. Platinum had a huge problem, but the U.S. government actually, I think it was one of the major banks. I want to say it was JP Morgan, but I don't. So don't take my word on that. But one of the major banks ended up getting fined almost $1 billion. 2 of them have been fined over the last 5 years. All right, because of practices like this, shady business practices and controlling and manipulating market. Well, the issue is this works as long as people understand that the metal exists inside of the vault. And with China coming in and closing off their exports back over to the United States, you severely restrict how much metal is actually going to be available inside of the United States of America. And we've been operating at a deficit for years when it comes to silver. That is the amount that ends up coming out of the ground, versus how much is actually being consumed has been at a deficit. We have been consuming way more annually than we have been producing. And this is not fear mongering. These are just simple facts. And so eventually basic economics end up creeping in, and the basic economics say that the price has to go up. And is there a market where we can see that? Yeah, it's Shanghai. And Shanghai was trading at almost $85 over the weekend, believe it or not. Like ended up closing on Friday, somewhere around there. Almost $85. When the markets opened up last night, the price in the United States spiked to $84 and then it tanked. And then it spiked back up to 80 and then it tanked again. And now we're back down to where we're currently sitting at, which is like 71.01. Now, the deal is physical supply actually in constraint? And the answer for that is yes. And we know that because spot price, which is like the price that people are paying for immediate delivery today, is above the futures price, meaning people want the physical metal today and they're willing to pay more today than they are in the future, because they don't think it's going to exist in the future. But the paper contracts kind of control the market. So it's this weird thing. But either way, when you have, all right, basically futures price that's leading spot price, you have what's called it being in contango. So the futures price is leading, meaning the price is going to climb in the future. People believe that it's going to be there and the market functions normally. When those two things flip-flop and people start paying more now than they would in the future, which if you think about it, what they're actually doing is they're paying for the storage of that by paying for the future price and several other things. Like who has the ability to store, like each one of these contracts is like 5,000 ounces, for example. Okay. So who has that type of freaking storage space for all of these massive freaking bars? Not a lot of people and not a lot of businesses. And so what these businesses like Tesla and freaking everybody else, Raytheon, blah, 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 end up doing is purchasing it for the future. And then they get delivery, they melt it, they use it in their products, they do what they do, right? So that's how China is going about declaring war on the United States by restricting that price. Essentially what they're doing is making the US default inside the COMEX, because you have 300 plus claims per ounce of silver that they're currently sitting on. And as soon as those companies do what's called standing for delivery, meaning, no, we want our stuff like you said you could give it to us, there's going to be delays in delivery and there's going to be defaults. In January, if this ends up happening and the market ends up default, ladies and gentlemen, you are talking about 10% inflation that the United States could see just because of that. And that's not a joke. That's not a fairy tale number. And that's not just me making something up. Back in November, there's another silver market, right? So the COMEX is basically for the United States, and then you have the LBMA over for like Europe. And the LBMA had X amount of silver, but what ended up happening, India, who is a BRICS nation, if you didn't know, so you know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, 4 main BRICS nations. India, who is a BRICS nation, had acquired a bunch of silver contracts, and they stood for delivery on all of those silver contracts. And guess what happened? It drained the LBMA, drained them. And then we saw rumors and everything else of the US COMEX having to fly silver over there in order to bail them out. If the LBMA would have defaulted, guess what? You'd have been talking about more inflation over on the EU. And so what you have is you have BRICS nations that are waging war on something that is quite simple, right? A basic metal that comes out of the earth, because they've realized that the US banks and the US markets have been controlling this for so long, and they've been doing it in kind of a shady way, that as long as they understood the system, which they did, and they started demanding everything, that the price would actually collapse and you would default the markets, and it's going to cause a huge rise in inflation. That's a problem, ladies and gentlemen, especially when you talk about it being strategic for U.S. defense, strategic for our allies' defense. By keeping us in a persistent state of war over inside of Israel, over inside of the Middle East, over inside of Ukraine, that soaks up a ton of those resources, and the defense industry benefits from it, because guess what? The cheaper the metal, the better off they are. The more margins basically they have, like the higher freaking profit that they can make when they're selling these things to the US government, to the EU, to everybody else. So how does Iran play into this? Well, Iran's been hit really hard. Like I said, their dollar has been crashing. Like the Iranian currency has been crashing, and you've seen almost a 900% increase in the Iranian currency over the last 10 years. And that's caused the people to start rioting and revolting. But why? Well, look at where the cost of oil is today. We're sitting around $57 a barrel. Why? Because if Russia wants to maintain any sort of like legitimate currency power in order to fund their war over inside of Ukraine, they've got to keep oil costs above $65 a barrel, right? Like that's where if oil is selling above 65, they're going to do okay. And when we go back and we start talking about, the map and what the U.S. ended up doing by reopening the Red Sea, which a lot of ships still aren't doing it, but enough have done it to where it's affected Russia's ability to offload this cheap oil, right? So they no longer have these big freaking gaps. They get to play the game like everybody else. They've got to now compete with everybody else. So now we're seeing oil prices dropping dramatically, which hurts Russia's bottom dollar. That affects their ability to fund this war over inside of Ukraine. That's forcing Putin to come to the table. At the same time, China constricting this market, U.S. might not have freaking like precision guided munitions. So guess what now? Zelensky's got to come to the table. That's why, in Matt's opinion, we're getting all these peace talks, because Russia can't afford to keep this up or they're going to end up collapsing. And Zelensky is not going to have the munitions to fight Russia because China is now controlling the market. And by the way, how does Iran play into this? Well, a lot of their GDP ends up coming from oil sales, right? But not just from Iranian oil. Those ships that the U.S. ended up intercepting off the coast of Venezuela, now we could zoom out. We could go to talk about Venezuela and how all this tied in. Nobody thought it was funny at all. Nobody. Why the United States decided it'd be a good idea to go to war against drugs inside of Venezuela. Why we want to start declaring Maduro as a terrorist and like all of these narco-terrorist regimes, right? What we ended up discovering with the seizure of the last 3 oil tankers is that they're all being operated by the IRGC. The IRGC is a designated foreign terror organization by the United States of America. Designated FTO by the United States of America. That gives the United States different targeting authorities to go after them. So now we're seizing ships that are being operated by the IRGC. And guess where they were taking that oil? From Venezuela. They were taking it and they were delivering it to China. That's where it was going. So now Iran gets to benefit because, by the way, their dollar's crashing freaking hard. Iran is benefiting. The IRGC is benefiting. And they're funding their ballistic missile programs and they're funding terrorism. Everybody knows Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror. But that's how they're getting that money, washing it and using it. Because the United States has lots of sanctions against Iran. And last week, we ended up warning Iran over inside of, what the heck is it? The UN. Telling them that you need to take this olive branch from Donald Trump. And they're refusing to do it. As a matter of fact, they came out saying that they're now at war with the West because of all this. And all of that has caused, believe it or not, record amounts of inflation over inside of Iran. Videos have been pouring out over the last 12 hours or so. I want you guys to take a look at this about what's actually happening over in Iran because of this. Like, we're at war, but it's kind of a proxy war against the dollar. And in my opinion, it's almost an ability to take over the global economy. That's what BRICS wants to do. I've been saying this for years. Russia, China want to take over the US dollar. They know they can't win in a near-peer conflict, but for God forbid, they go after the US dollar and the US dollar collapses, everybody loses faith. That inflation caused by COMEX being drained, by the LBMA being drained, is because people will lose faith in the U.S. system and the U.S. dollar. Therefore, it's going to take more. 10% is a fairly conservative estimate, by the way, when we talk about that. And again, we're going after Iranian oil. We're going after Russian oil. We're throwing sanctions on them. China is backing them all day long. And China just went to war against the United States dollar. This is what's currently happening over in Iran. You have these massive protests. Look at this. The amount of people that are flooding that street. And what are they protesting about? They're protesting about the cost of living over there. All of the shops have closed down. Everything's closed down. And instead, people are taking to the streets. Saw a video this morning of one Iranian law enforcement official with a megaphone trying to freaking yell at people to basically behave. And it's not working. These people are pissed off. They're screaming death to the president. They are going to frickin' town on him, like going off. It's finally happening over there. So it's no wonder that Iran's now declaring war on the West, because the Ayatollah's regime is about to collapse. It's about to collapse. Now, a lot of you guys are like confused, right? Like, I know that was a lot of information that we ended up throwing out on the map. A lot of you guys might be confused. So why would the Ayatollah, where does Russia even play into it? Well, the IRGC, that militant organization that we talked about, like official military wing of Iran, answers directly to the Ayatollah. And for those of you guys who don't know who the Ayatollah is, he is a religious figurehead that oversees Iran, and he also is leading, allegedly, the Shia faith. All of them, and I mean all of them, and it doesn't matter if it's Shia or Sunni, have teamed up and gone against Israel. And this was a conversation I ended up have a long time ago with you guys about why it is the way it is, and that is an entire religious discussion that maybe I need to touch on another day for how all of that's happening. But the bottom line is, you had Russian Spetsnaz that were working side by side with Hezbollah for years inside of Syria and inside Lebanon. For years. When I went over to Israel, I talked with Israeli soldiers who told me that they had found, no BS, entire like C2 nodes or command and control nodes, or what we in the military, would call CPs or command posts, basically rooms where they're controlling movement with everything written in frickin' Russian on the wall. That's wild. That over inside southern Lebanon, that they were coming after those things, and that information starts getting suppressed. I showed you guys different stockpiles at the time that were being found over inside of southern Lebanon, and I was like, kind of odd. We had people come on the show, people that have been fighting on the front over inside of Ukraine, coming up on the show and stating the way they're stockpiling those munitions is exactly how they get stockpiled over inside of eastern Ukraine. So Russia is helping to orchestrate a ton of this stuff. Why? Because they benefit from that persistent conflict. Russia benefits from a persistent conflict in the Middle East because it soaks up U.S. munitions. It got so bad underneath Biden. You guys can remember this, and you can go look this up. Remember the first time that Russia used cluster munitions, was rumored to use cluster munitions over inside of Ukraine. I do, because I remember doing like the analysis of the overhead imagery that ended up coming out of it, and a lot of the submunitions that were found laying on the ground, and it was undeniable. Russia had used cluster munitions. The United States had condemned them. The international community condemned Russia for using cluster munitions. And then in the blink of an eye, the United States ended up supplying cluster munitions to Ukraine in the form of artillery shells to use against Russia. Biden got asked why. And in his own mental slip, he ended up coming out and stating, and it's not even a mental slip, the man was just being honest. He ended up stating that we were running out of everything else. You guys remember that? I do. That's why the U.S. supplied Ukraine with cluster munitions, because we had drained our freaking artillery supply and had to hold on what we could. And by the way, you can't just turn back on these factories and have them start rotating these munitions out. And now we've rotated away from artillery. Now we're using like FPV drones and fiber optics and all sorts of like crazy stuff, right? No, this isn't a rum and coke. It's iced coffee. Thank you very much. That's what they're using, right? So we are draining the supply. Those bombs, they all freaking cost money. But even more importantly, those bombs all require strategic metal that China is now in control of. And if you don't think that the market is out of control, I beg to differ, because when you go and you look at the price of the physical metal over inside of Shanghai, which when you buy metal off of Shanghai, guess what? You are buying the metal. You're not sitting around trading contracts and playing games with the market. You are buying the physical metal. That's what you're doing. And that is about $10 higher than the current price here in the United States of America. It means they're controlling everything. Meanwhile, over inside of Iran, they declare war. Here's another scene. Yeah. How about that? When I tell you the people in Iran are pissed off. Now, somebody says you would think that the prices would skyrocket instead of crash. You are correct. And the prices will continue to go up, in my opinion. Right. And this isn't financial advice. It's just simple like market allocation, supply and demand, basic economics. 50 million ounces. Now, if you were JP Morgan, who's holding on God only knows how many hundreds of ounces, 700 and something ounces is what I got told today, and you're holding on to 700 and something ounces, what do you think would end up happening if they didn't sell that stuff on the COMEX? The price is going to go up. It makes 0 sense for any of the banks holding that physical metal here in the United States financially, who just took major hits because they've been shorting the metal for so long. Major hits. Rumors of like $30 billion bailouts, $32 billion bailouts by the United States government, a $22 billion one on Friday, I believe it is, and another $30 billion over the weekend when the markets opened. That's insane, man. That's a lot of freaking losses. And if they just jump in now and sell it where it's at, where do you think they're going to be? You think they're going to recoup their money? I don't think they are. The banks quite literally have no incentive to sell right now. None. And so what we're seeing right now, and it's not just in the United States, 700 million ounces. 700 million ounces. What you're seeing right now, and it's not hard to figure it out, we're told that inflation is doing great, our economy is doing great, and it's all propped up via bubble. You guys remember what happened in 2008 and 2009 with the housing crisis and everything else? That's basically what you're seeing in a metals market right now. Basically what you're seeing. Here, you've got people on the streets. They're feeling it already over inside of Iran, and over in Russia, they're also feeling it. Over in China, they're also feeling it. Go look up the Chinese housing crisis that's taking place and how much crap is sitting around unfinished. We're going to war with the dollar right now. And the byproduct of that, what you are seeing of that is this. You are seeing people pissed off. And honestly, if you take a look at what happened prior to World War II, what was going on? Prior to World War II, we had a huge financial crisis, the Great Depression, for crying out loud. And guess what the United States government ended up doing back then? Crazy California Fishing says, not asking for financial advice, but at work and busy, so hard to follow, but silver price going to spike 10% in 6 months. The honest to God's truth is nobody can give you an answer. And I hate to tell you that, man, but anybody that's sitting here telling you that silver is going to go to this price, they have no idea of knowing. Unless they're in control of major amounts of metal that they're willing to offload it at, you don't really know. If we end up taking a look, and I showed you guys this chart because a lot of you guys are concerned with this. If we take a look at this and we go to this chart and I show you guys this and I go 1 day and it shows it's down 8%. I go back 5 days and it's still up almost 3% when we go back 5 trading days. 5 days total. It's still up almost 3% at the current price. When we go back 1 month, it's up $12. When you go back year to date, you're up 140%. What you're seeing right now with this drop, with everybody seeing red, is it's scaring people out. With that rumor of JP Morgan switching from 200 million short to 750 million long, when they dump those contracts, it allows them to come in at a cheaper price, i.e. they're going to make more profit on that. That's what's going to end up happening. They're going to make more profit. If we go back to the 5-day mark and you end up taking a look at the peak of this sucker, this is wrong because I actually watched it happen. Right? I watched this sucker pop above $80 today. So this isn't even accurate. If you go to another site that ends up tracking this stuff, give me a second here. If we go to another site that ends up tracking like the price of metal, we can go over to SD Bullion. Okay. So let me move this tab for you. This is one of the major online dealers, major online retailers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're moving it right now at $72.70. At like 5 or 6 a.m. this morning, I watched this sucker. Well, excuse me. It was last night, actually, when the markets opened last night. They opened up at 6 p.m. Eastern last night. I watched that price that currently sits at 72 spike to 84. because the metal being traded over inside of China right now, the major producers of it, the people that actually trade where it's supposed to be trading, was sitting at freaking like 85 almost. And it traded allegedly at like 88 or something like that. So Crypto King saying it's showing at 84 is what he's showing. Over here right now, this is the actual physical spot price. There's another place that you can go to, APMEX. They move a lot and their prices tend to be a little bit higher when you go and look at the metals on APMEX. God, I hate that. When you end up going over to APMEX, the prices tend to be a little bit higher as far as spot goes, up on there. But even they showing spot at 72.77, and you compare that to the actual futures price of 71.40, and that's over $1, like $1.50 of backwardation, if that makes sense to you guys. And what that means is that people want it now, and that they don't want it later because they don't think it's going to be there. So that is what that signal means. It means there's constraint in the market. And all of this plays in. And Thumper says he uses JM. Dude, whatever it is you're using, great. But I guarantee you the spot prices are all going to be within a couple percentage points of what I just showed you for the other one. Meanwhile, this is where futures is trading at. And what you're seeing on the screen is actually about 10 minutes back of like current time, right? So that's how that kind of plays out on your screen. But either way, this has no option but to come up. And so right now you're seeing accumulation at these levels. And it's healthy because over the last year, when you go and you look at it, particularly in the last like 2 months, back in November, it was trading at $48. October 31st, $48.16. October 31st, $48, and it's up to $70. It is going to continue to blow, in my opinion, because of basic supply and demand. There's no other option for this to go anywhere. But the big thing that ought to be concerning all of you is you look at it, and I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this realistically. A lot of people are going, oh my gosh, we're going to be making so much money. This is great. We can take it. We can use it. We can off-sell it. It's going to be great. No, what really you are seeing is the market returning to normal levels, right? It's actually adjusting. Those banks that are moving those paper contracts, buying, selling, shorting, etc., they lost control because supply has been constrained to the point that people no longer have trust in that. And I see you guys asking, where does it plateau? The answer is nobody knows. Because what you're in right now is this price discovery phase, meaning it can go anywhere. And the question is how high does the price have to go for the banks to be able to let go of that money? Now, there's another option, which is the U.S. government intervenes. That's another option. And I want you to think about this. U.S. government listed this stuff as a critical mineral for a reason this year. China restricted exports for a reason this year. Russia, China, India, BRICS nations have been accumulating gold and silver for the last several years for a reason. Adam DLC says, now tell that to Daddy Trump. He seems to disagree. Daddy Trump is looking at redoing the financial system this year, looking at going up over towards crypto and things of that nature. He hinted at it all the way back in July. You've got a finite amount of Bitcoin. It's being burned at like a rate. Yeah, you can continue to mine and whatever. I don't think that we're going to run out of silver. Just like I don't think we're going to run out of diamonds. You guys know how diamonds ended up getting controlled, right? Why you pay so much for a diamond? It's not like diamonds are rare. Diamonds are a dime a dozen. You guys know this, right? Diamonds are a dime a dozen. They used to discover these things like way, way back in the day. And there's a major company who I'm not going to list that back in the 1800s ended up investing very, very heavily into diamonds. And they ended up coming across a buttload of them over inside of Africa. And then ended up shoving them into their vaults. And they're still to this day the largest consumer of those diamonds. And then they release them at a slower rate. They control the market and they control the price because they choose how much and when to release them. Diamonds are a rock. They're a dime a dozen, ladies and gentlemen. But you have a monopoly on the market that is being controlled, that's releasing, and then they ended up putting out solid marketing telling you guys that you can go out and diamond. Well, I'm not going to say it, but they made everybody pretty much jump on board with it. And they made it a gold standard, if you will, for a lot of different things. Of course, there's some industrial use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But bottom line is, it's the exact same thing you're seeing here, where you have people that are in control of massive amounts of this stuff that have stockpiled it. So the question is, at what price do they want to start releasing that? We have plenty in supply, but it's owned by private corporations. It's not owned by the U.S. government. U.S. government can help with the oil price because we have a strategic reserve. We can release millions of freaking barrels of crude and start controlling the price. The U.S. government doesn't have the ability to do that here. Private corporations do. Prior to World War II setting in, what did you have taking place in the world? You had the Great Depression, and you had Hitler come out and blame the Jews for just about everything under the sun. And right now, you have inflation and you have a market that is flying out of control, and you have the U.S. government that's chasing down oil tankers in Venezuela, trying to shut down Iran, has ran out of a lot of different types of munitions. And in order to build more, if we're going to continue to drop bombs in the Middle East and over inside of Ukraine, we need that metal. And China controls it. They control the vast majority of the exports if they want to bring on new metal. Now imagine what's going to happen if the U.S. government says this isn't good. We need to create a strategic stockpile just like we do of oil. How much more demand is that going to place on a market where only 50 million ounces, to the best of my knowledge, are currently available over inside of COMEX? And the LBMA got drained back in November by India. If that's the case, in my opinion, the price is going to skyrocket unless the U.S. government does what they did back in the day and they say, you know what, you're no longer allowed to own this, so we're going to take it from you at this price, and then we're going to reprice it across the board. What's going to happen then? You're talking about price going through the roof. Unless the U.S. government tries to play this game. I don't know, to be perfectly honest. And a lot of you guys are saying, no idea. People are predicting it's going to go up to $500,000, $1,500 an ounce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The truth is, nobody freaking knows. Absolutely nobody knows what's going to happen. But the U.S. government's going to have to step in at some point, or this thing is going to fly out of control. While they are talking and saying that this is over, I want you guys to take a look. That's up 140% over the last year. And when you look at what's happened since November, all of this actually started popping off in September. It was creeping through the 30s and getting into the 40s, July and everything. And I think I started telling you guys about this back in July timeframe, saying, hey, take a look at this, guys. It wasn't primarily what I focused on. And the only reason I'm doing such a long podcast on this today is because it definitely ties into the global war that's taking place. It ties into what's taking place with Ukraine and Russia. It ties into what China is doing. It ties into a lot of different things. And you want to hear something else? Those massive data centers that are being built everywhere, guess what they need a buttload of? If you guys are over on the West Coast, you know about this. Data center industry is exploding right now. Absolutely exploding across the Western world. We need them everywhere. We want more information. We want it done now. The AI boom, creating data centers just within itself, right? Banking systems, all of this stuff runs on all of that crap. The internet that I'm currently talking to you guys on, all of that. And guess what they need? They need a lot of silver. Why? Because it's not going to corrode. It can pass information electricity very, very quickly. And so they need it in order to build those things. And the demand is only scheduled to go up. Like when you actually take a look at it, South Korea ended up developing a solid state battery that uses a buttload of silver. If only like 10% of the electric vehicles on the market end up adopting the solid state battery that might be online as early as like 2026, it's going to create a brand new demand. I'm letting you guys know right now that this, in my opinion, is one of the main reasons we're seeing all of this crap going on around the world. It's not a joke. It's not to be laughed at. It's not some little tiny deal. All right. I want you guys to take a look at the numbers of inflation over in Iran because of the sanctions and how all this went. In 2015, right, 3,200 of the rial could buy a US dollar. 10 years later, street value of the US dollar over there can get you about 600,000 rial. How well do you think that's going to do? Not very much. Like, that's why the people are pissed. And that's also what you're looking at. So when I talk about this, I'm bringing it up. If the price ends up going to $300 an ounce, how much do you think the US dollar is actually going to be worth at that point? Really what you're doing is you're preserving your purchasing power. That's all you're doing with whatever rate it's at. And right now in your discovery mode, it's going to happen. And I don't think gold's going to sit where it's at. And I definitely don't think platinum's going to sit where it's at. Like, you guys want to talk about like something serious that you need to take a look in, because it's the exact same thing that ends up going into it. All right. If we were to take platinum and look at it today, it's trading at $2,119. Right. And I want you guys to notice how this is across the board, how everything's going down. Gold's going down, silver's going down, and platinum's going down. Platinum back towards the beginning of this year was like $950 an ounce, if I remember correctly. Right now it's sitting at $2,119. It's down $345 today. Yesterday it was at almost $2,500. Almost at $2,500. Now, here's the crazy thing about platinum. Historically, if you're 40 plus years of age like I am, historically, if you go back and you think prior to 2009, platinum was actually more expensive than gold. In fact, 70% of platinum's history that's been on the market trading against gold, it sat at least 50% higher than gold. On average, about 50% higher. And it actually rose to 2.5 times higher than gold at one point in time. It would take you 2.5 ounces of gold to buy 1 ounce of platinum before the entire market crashed. And then eventually gold took off above platinum. Why? Because the same exact thing that was happening with silver was happening to platinum. And it's the same exact thing with platinum today, where you have a supply deficit of platinum. It's only coming out of South Africa, from what I've read. And there's a hell of a lot less of it mined every single year. Also, a hell of a lot less of it consumed, but it's still in a supply deficit. It's still in a supply deficit. And so if the market is currently resetting, and platinum itself goes back to just even keel with gold, right now you're looking at another freaking like massive gain. It's going to double itself. If it goes back to historical norms, which if platinum is rising, so is silver, so is gold. God only knows, dude. You could be looking at gold being $6,000 an ounce and platinum being $9,000 an ounce. And that's not a joke. That's just historical norm for where it would be trading at if you really kind of look at it. And silver, I don't even know what that would put it at, because that's a whole different market being controlled. If banks were wise, and I think they're going to be, what they're going to end up doing is taking a lot of their money out of silver and gold sometime in the near-term future and dumping it into platinum. Because what that's going to allow them to do is make a lot of this money back that they're currently losing. I am very, very curious what you guys think about all of this. Very, very curious. And because of that, you know what? Before I even get into that, I got to tell you guys more about frickin' China. Totally frickin' forgot about this because it ended up happening last night as well. When we talk about war and what's going on and why this is such a big deal, why you're talking about money, right? Global silver over $86 an ounce, according to Anastar 019. That's Taiwan, and that's China. China moved a massive part of its naval fleet in a military exercise yesterday around Taiwan. A massive part of its naval fleet in a military exercise around Taiwan. I want to say that number is huge. It's freaking massive. Now, that's important because last month we learned, I want to say it was like hundreds of freaking ICBMs, nuclear capable ICBMs, were being loaded up on the northern border. That was in a leaked Pentagon report that ended up coming out. And China was moving nuclear capable ICBMs into launchers up by the Mongolian border. Now, over the last 24 hours, we're seeing this. We're seeing ICBMs being moved in China, being disguised as cranes. You guys see this right here? This isn't the only video. This isn't the only report. You're seeing ICBMs after last week's report of China moving nuclear capable ICBMs into launchers up by Mongolia. China is now moving ICBMs being disguised as cranes. That's not the only video of this crap happening. There's another one I'll show you. Here's some more images of it. Not just one being thrown. Dude, they've got tons of these damn things that they're moving into position. So you got China surrounding Taiwan and moving ICBMs in. You've got the United States taking over oil tankers, leaving Venezuela, hurting the IRGC, like trying to control the cost of oil. That's hurting the Russian economy. That's hurting the Chinese economy. That's definitely hurting the Iranian economy to the point where they're all uprising and revolting because they can't afford anything in their daily lives. And China, in return, ends up restricting the largest exporter of this metal that we need to create munitions for warfare, to create data centers, to create information, to create all of this crap. China just restricted exports. You got to have a government license to send that crap out somewhere. By the way, they also ended up sanctioning pretty much our entire defense industry the other day. China did. China sanctioned the entire defense industry, basically. What do you think that means? That means that Chinese metal isn't going to our defense industry. Why? Because now we can't produce the munitions needed with Chinese metal to start and wage war. That means those banks that are in control of that metal are going to want to drive that price even higher. Now that I've talked about all of that, now that I've brought all of that up, now I want to open up the Discord. Now I want to talk to you guys over in the Discord to go over this stuff because I really want to know what everybody thinks. So I've just opened it up. I'm over in the Discord. If you guys are over on YouTube, feel free to jump into the Discord so that we can talk about this. Everybody's allowed to jump in. Everybody's allowed to chitty chat. This is, in my opinion, probably one of the biggest deals that's taking place in the United States. And when I talked to you guys about this the first time, when I first originally had brought this up, we had people come in here saying it's not gonna breach 40, and I was like, dude, supply demand, it clearly will. No, once it reaches 40, it's gonna end up dumping. If you guys want to chat, raise your hand and get in here into the Discord and tell me what you guys think. I already see Death Rides, raising his hand up. So, yep, Death Rides, let's get you in here, brother. Let's bring you up. Oh, for some reason the stage isn't open. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Open the stage, and for some reason it's also not showing any of this crap. Why is it not allowing me to bring you guys up right now? Why is this over here? No, I don't want to look at that on Discord. Death Rides, what's up, brother? Let's get you in here. Bringing you up, friend. Anybody else, you guys are welcome to come in here and discuss. Death, did you accept? There you are.
All right. There we go. Yeah, so this is one of my things that I've followed for decades now. Going back to Ron Paul, he talked about gold and silver a lot. Ross Perot a little bit. So here's some stuff that a lot of people may or may not realize that's going on with the silver markets. There's been two things. It's been suppressed on purpose.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. So there's two things that are going on with the silver market. One, there's both suppression, price suppression, and one is by doing shorts. So all of the banks have massive shorts on silver to where they say, we're going to give you silver, but we're going to wait 3 months. And they hope the price goes down. And if they do, they make a profit on that. But then if the price goes up, they lose a lot of money, especially as it's skyrocketing. That's why the banks had to go to the quick cash market, the repo market. They just got billions of dollars out of the repo market, and it's because of their silver shorts. It's probably a big reason why. And the thing about shorts, they're really dangerous because there is no limit to the amount of money you lose if you lose on a short.
Well,
And
right.
so if the price keeps going up, so let's say silver gets to 200, all of our banks are going to go bust. If silver gets to 200 and they lose out on their shorts, and they don't have the silver on hand.
Well, that's why they ended up flipping everything. That's why we ended up seeing all of these, like, this was all the people getting out of their shorts. Like right now, you don't, like, it's insane. You have a bunch of people that ended up getting out, which is why those dumps are taking place. All those dumps are taking place because people are taking the hits, and the U.S. government bailing out over $30 billion US over the last couple of days because of it.
Right. But there's longer shorts that they can't get out of. There's no get out of jail free card. They've got contracts coming up, and they owe those ounces of silver. Doesn't matter what the price is.
You're not wrong.
And so they're going to lose.
You're not wrong, but when JP Morgan is sitting on 700 plus million ounces and there's only 50 million sitting in COMEX, there is no incentive for them to sell. So some banks might go under and the U.S. government might try to bail them out. But at the end of the day, you're going to have massive banks and massive amounts of money that are going to start moving and flowing as this thing starts repricing, right?
Right. Well, there's going to be a lot of things happening. Most people, literally, there's going to be a cascade effect to the bond market. Stocks are going to move. Bitcoin is going to move because of what's happening in silver. Because there's people who are winning now want to get on the silver train, and then you have people who are losing their shirt, and they're going to try to do whatever recovery they can. So there's going to be a lot. You're going to have banks selling assets to pay for their silver shorts. So they're going to be dumping treasuries and also all sorts of stuff is going to happen. The other suppression that they've been using is the paper market. And this is a big part of what we're seeing right now. The paper market is much larger than the actual physical silver market.
Yeah, right now you're sitting at
paper silver.
Right now you're sitting about 300 claims per ounce, roughly, with what's in there, from what I understand.
Right. And so they've just been printing this paper and say, this is good for silver. Or if we don't have the silver, we'll give you cash, like in the fine print, right? And so people are going to realize that their paper silver is worthless. Now, there's some other stuff. There's ETFs like SLV that has a lot of physical silver, but they don't have enough. Mm-hmm. And COMEX doesn't have enough. You're going to find there's 50, we believe COMEX has 38 to 50 million ounces. They are going to have by like March 15th or something like that, they are supposed to give out hundreds of millions of ounces for industrial production, just for solar panel companies, just for Teslas and Samsung and chip makers. NVIDIA uses silver in all their chips. They all need tens of millions of ounces for the first quarter. And nobody can fulfill those contracts. Nobody. Unless they somehow get China to give up their stash of silver or something.
Which isn't going to happen because the export restrictions. And that's why that makes it such a big deal and why it was so smart of China. Now,
And so how we ended up here, though, is because they've suppressed the price for so long. Right. It's so undervalued. Why everything else has gone up in price and regulation has gone up. There hasn't been a lot of new mines opening. There's not a lot of prospecting. There's not people trying to ramp up production. They're going to now, but it's been so held down by the price being held down.
Right. But you're talking about 5 years before they were able to put more mines from locating to digging to production. Plus you're going to need new production facilities, what do you call it, places that melt it all? Like you're going to need all of that stuff.
You're going to get some mines that can get in a little faster if they've done a lot of the work.
Hold up. Phantom Shaman says, could Trump seize silver reserves and physical silver like gold was seized? Yeah, he absolutely could. I do believe that. What about you? I think Trump could seize it.
Absolutely. what a lot of what's going to happen though, as the price goes up, you do get people who start selling their silverware or their old jewelry, and they start taking it to buy, those little shops that say we buy gold.
So 30%,
so they're going to start taking their stuff.
So 30% of the market goes towards investors, and that's going to cover silverware and people that are holding onto bars and coins and all of that stuff. 30% of the market. And some people are going to do it. It would relieve a little bit of pressure, but it's definitely not going to satisfy that level of demand.
Cover it.
Right.
It's not going to cover it. And so I think that we're going to see a couple of things. One, this is what should happen. Let me say that. I don't know what's going to happen. I've lost faith in my ability to predict the future due to everything being so crazy. But here's what should happen. Trump should declare an emergency because of the silver shortage. And he should use his emergency powers to reduce regulation on silver mining as much as reasonably humanly possible. He needs to make it so miners who, they know there's silver there, and if they want to spend their money and invest and get more silver quicker, they can do that, and they don't need to spend 5 years in courtrooms and permitting offices.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing like nuclear energy, but here's the problem. Right? Like silver, like the vast majority of it's mined as a byproduct. It's not necessarily like the main metal that they go in and they go after. So like copper, for example, if you look at copper, I think copper spiked like massively over the last couple of days. But for copper, they're able to pull a hell of a lot more out, and silver just ends up being a byproduct when they're mining copper, for example, or zinc, right? And so
not always. That's often the case, but that's not always the case. So there's there's not a lot of big mines that you can open up to get vein silver.
I understand that. So the question is, at what price then do people start ignoring the zinc and start going after the silver and direct their operations in that way? You know what I mean? Like, at what price do they start going, this is going to be the main metal we're after, and this is going to be the byproduct of what we're after, which could be a significant chunk.
It depends on a couple of things, because it's not the price today. It's what is the price going to be when they actually get metal out of the ground.
Right.
And so if you're a silver miner in Nevada, and there's a spot with more silver, and you've done some of the basic paperwork, and you think you can get online in 3 years, you have to expect the price is going to be high enough for you to make a profit in 3 years, not today. Mm-hmm. And so everything might wash out to an extent before then. But I think what we're going to see, at least for the near 50 years or something like that, it's going to be a lifetime or two. Silver is going to be back up at a much higher rate in comparison to gold. Historically, it was a 1-to-20 ratio before the paper markets. So for 20 ounces of silver, you could trade that for 1 ounce of gold. And it's gone up to 50 now, but that's with a bunch of paper. People don't know the true value. So
the actual GSR right now, like the gold to silver ratio, today is going to be I think it's going to be in the 60s, because it dumped down to 70 something an ounce right now. But the gold silver ratio,
that's crazy, because there's actually a lot less silver than there is gold.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And gold actually doesn't get used up as much. It can be recycled a lot easier, and it's not like it's worth it for you to go through and pick through little pieces of a computer to dig out the gold out of it, but not as much for just like a little silver solder, right? And then processing it and everything else.
The problem is silver's consumed, right? Like, you've got silver tied up in solar panels, you've got it tied up in data centers. It gets used in medical applications, and then it's gone, right? So microbial properties and all the other crap. Plus, you're not worried about rust and corrosion, blah 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 blah.
And socks at REI,
right? And socks at REI, and socks at REI. But here's the point: somebody's socks are going to be worth like an ounce of gold soon. So here you've got the GSR, the gold silver ratio, sitting at 59 right now, is what they're showing. So 59.79, so basically 60. And historically, when it compressed the last time, like big time, it was like 17 for a compression. So if you were to take that, you're still looking at like 150, 200 an ounce, just at like current prices where it's sitting at. But obviously, as silver rises, so will gold. And so the question is, where does that end up factoring in at the end, right? Like, where does that actually end up coming out?
So
if it goes down?
So gold generally leads, and silver follows and shoots higher. So silver moves up and down faster and more extreme within its price range, whereas gold is a little bit more stable as it goes up or down. It doesn't have the bigger price swing generally.
Except in moments like this where we have massive backwardation and you have silver in price discovery mode. Silver led gold this year, and it will continue to probably in the future. Fluff and McPuffin says copper will be something when the dollar is nothing. Yeah. And Dustin White says, look up the term rehypothecation. Applies to gold, silver stocks. That's why GameStop squeezed. That's what's happening to silver now. So yeah, but the difference with GameStop is you didn't have the actual physical demand for, I mean, you did, right? But it wasn't real. Here we actually have like a market that can give a little bit, right? So cars, for example, right? They need these batteries. They need all of this crap. Data centers, the military industrial complex needs this metal, and it can get absorbed within those costs, right? For an EV that costs $50,000 and they're only using, say, 5 ounces of silver within their EV, well, they can easily absorb that cost and roll that over. So that's what allows that price to go up. When you're talking about GameStop, you're talking about people that are like pumping the market, right? There's no a real economical drive behind it. This has an economical drive behind it, which is what makes it so scary, because China and private industries now control everything. And those private industries don't give a crap about you and me, and they don't give a crap about inflation. They just care about making that money. That's the problem.
Well, and there's another big problem with China owning everything. And this is another thing that Trump needs to do regulation-wise if we have any chance of getting out of this with silver not hitting $1,000, is that we have to figure out a way to let a refinery build and not spend a ton of money.
But will we?
Because right now, China's the only country, basically, maybe Peru, but there's not any silver refineries of any kind of size in the United States. And that's got to happen. It's got to happen. It's polluting. It's not great. Nobody wants it in their backyard, but it's got to happen. And we need to do it here.
Yeah. R. White says, buy silver with cash and in person. Don't buy with a credit card. I would tend to agree with that statement. I would agree with it, but here's the catch: is you could lose it all in a boating accident, or you could sell it for cash to somebody, and you don't even have to really claim it unless there's capital gains that go into it. But that's a whole different discussion on taxes and stuff. But you could sell like tiny little amounts of it over time, and then the government doesn't.
I think something's people need to be real careful though with silver. There is a lot of fake silver out there. And there are fake silver coins. You can go to a coin show full of coin experts. There's a video on YouTube where a guy goes to a coin show and starts testing the coin shop's silver coins with booths set up, and was finding at multiple booths fake silver coins being sold by coin shops. They had a silver plating on it, right? And so, but like a tungsten core or whatever. And so you got to be careful and buy from a reputable coin shop that's using an X-ray machine, or buying from one of the big bullion dealers online. But I bought a fake silver coin at a bus station in Marin County, surrounded by $1 million homes. Had a rich guy wearing a Rolex. Had a few silver coins. He asked me if I wanted to buy one. I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
I take it to a nice coin shop. Guy sticks a magnet on it, hands it back to me, and I'm like, yeah, cool. It's magnet. And he's like, silver is not magnetic.
It's not good. Yeah.
Right. So, but that's one way to check. But you need to learn about it and make sure that you're not just buying silver from anybody, or you might get screwed.
Yeah. And so I want to show people this right now. And this is something for you guys to watch at home, determining what's going to happen with the price. And when I talk about backwardation earlier on, right now you got futures, like the paper contracts on the market, right, for projected, right, COMEX sales in a couple months, trading at 70, 71, and 96. And I went over here and you've got silver trading at 72.80. So it's up almost $1 over top of what it's trading at, which means that it's going to be dragging the market forward. And what you're going to see is you're going to see it compress, and then you're going to see it spring forward, right? So you'll see that that cost in between the two compressing, meaning that the futures market wants to catch up and then it'll spring forward above it. And then maybe it'll go back into like what's called like temporary contango, like it's within its normal setting, and then it will just shoot back up above it. And that's what we've seen happen over the last several days with it. And over the last week, we've had several different, like what ends up happening is exactly what I described, to where it goes back and forth and back and forth. And every single time spot price ends up jumping above the price of the paper contracts, the futures price, spot jumps up above it and it drags that forward. But the big thing that's actually driving all of this, which drove it up to $84 overnight, like as far as spot price goes, what drove it up to 84 overnight was the actual price of the physical metal over inside China. I can't state that enough. That is the actual price. That is, you buy that over inside of China, that's what they're paying for it. And so it's dragging it forward. And the reason they have to keep these markets in check, is because what will end up happening is people theoretically could be buying silver right now for $72 an ounce and shipping it over to China, making $15 an ounce right now. And you start,
arbitrage.
Right. You start doing that, and all of a sudden China is going to start controlling even more metal. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, so the United States cannot allow that to happen because we're not going to have anything. That's why it's such a huge deal. That's why that metal price is going to get drugged back forward. And that's why China's holding strong. Now, if you see China start dipping down to 70, 72, then you can be like, okay, maybe this is a top. That's kind of where we're going to hang out at. But that's not the case. That's not what's happening. Dustin White says, real demand or not, institutions sold 140% of GameStop to buyers, like selling 14 titles to one car. Rehypothecation caused price to squeeze up. Right. Yeah, got it. Like, but the point I'm trying to make is actual economic demand is what's driving this. And you're absolutely right as far as price suppression goes, but that also caused all of that crap that you're talking about going up. This is almost opposite of that, in my opinion. Go ahead.
The thing is if they can't fulfill contracts, they can't suppress the price with the paper or the shorts, because they're going to lose their shirt if they do the shorts. And everybody knows that there's no real silver behind the paper. And so we might have a dip. It might go back down to 60. Silver moves around funny. They got lots of ways to manipulate the price. They might try to get another steal. If they find it somewhere, they might try to drop the price and buy more. But we have a long way up to go in silver, because the reality is it's making these moves, and 99% of Americans have no idea what's going on. And if at some point there's going to be contracts not being delivered to Tesla or an NVIDIA, and it's going to end up on CNBC, and it might make the front page of the New York Times. And then all of a sudden, all the normies who aren't paying attention, who are just going about their lives, trying to raise their kids, but, not paying attention, are going to realize what's going on and what it means. And then everybody's going to want to jump in. And you're going to see rocket at that point. It's going to take time. We might be a month or two away before we start seeing any more moves. But they're coming.
And right now it is coming and it is happening. So, and just for example, for people, when you look at what's actually available on the market to buy right now, this is SD Bullion. It's one of the largest online dealers. And these are 10-ounce bars, which are a decent investment rate for people, because generally speaking, you get more bang for your buck, if you will, when you're buying 10-ounce bars. I want you to look at the amount of bars that they used to sell that are no longer in stock. And right now, what they have left over is a 10-ounce skeleton that is, I don't even know why anybody would want that with the gold plating, but they have that left. They have a Christmas bar. They have Johnson Matthey bar, and then they have this one. And the interesting part when you go across, as you guys can see it as I hover, it says the cost of one, $776, cost of one, $776, cost of one, $796, cost of one, $783. Well, it used to have 500 plus you could get, and now they have one set price for getting these bars. So you no longer get a discount for getting multiples and all of that other crap. They've limited it and restricted it all the way down to one. So that is a very tight supply inventory, and you can't even get any of these other ones. This used to be one of the cheaper bars.
If COMEX can't get silver, the only way SD Bullion can get silver right now is if people they've sold coins to sell them back to them. In fact, I guarantee you they are sending out emails to their customer list saying, if you want to sell us back silver, we're here. sell us your coins back, because they're not going to be able to get it if Tesla can't get it. SD Bullion can't get it either.
Bingo.
And so,
because
and so they're going to be
refiners can't get it.
So they're trying to get it.
Here's how you know. By the way, here's how you know nobody's actually giving it back right now. These are over on SD Bullion, 10-ounce silver bars, design of our choice, which is basically random 10-ounce bars that people send in. They're scratched up, whatever.
Generic silver. It doesn't have like a national stamp or anything.
No, I mean, it's stamped. Like, I've actually got some of this before, and it's stamped, and it's from reputable places. I go run grab it and show it. I mean, it's stamped and all that other stuff. It meets the standard, right? And I've sold some of this to actually like cover some.
Right, no, it's real silver. It's real silver, but it's not like the Philharmonic bars, whatever.
Right, but it's random stuff that people are sending in that they've been holding on to, and it's gone. They no longer have random stuff, so people are no longer actually selling that. And if they are, it's going to a refiner. They're not putting it back on the markets. They're making more selling it back to refiners and stuff than they think they are offloading it, potentially. I don't know. Or it doesn't meet their standards, so it's got to go get refined. I have no freaking clue what's going on. But what I do know is that you only have 4 different 10-ounce bars that are available, and you can only get one each. Like, there's only a cost, you can't just get one each, but there is a set price for those one each on those.
They're bulk discounts. Yeah. Well, right, the market's moving faster than they can keep their prices changing some of these days. So they gotta like build in. They can't they can't give themselves no cushion when the price is moving up $10 a day sometimes. Bingo. Right? Because then they're gonna lose their shirts. So they can't
Bingo.
Try to just stay right near spot.
Yeah, Dustin White says what he just said is my point here. Banks have 100 million ounces, but may have sold it or shorted it more. Could be 1 billion ounces silver oversold. Yeah, it's extremely oversold, man. It's extremely oversold. But the banks have no reason right now to take not what's registered, but what's available for sale. They have no reason to take it and actually put it on the market, which is why you've only got 50 million ounces sitting there. If you think about it, it was just trading at $84 last night. Last night, spot price hit 84. I watched it happen. And now it's trading at 70 something. So why would a bank take 100 million ounces at $15, $14 an ounce less of where it was last night? They're just going to hold it and wait for it to go back up. That's my point.
The banks also can't necessarily even sell their silver. A lot of their assets are used as a capital, as like a down payment on investment vehicles that they have. They have to keep a certain amount to stay AAA rated. They have to have a certain amount of gold on their books and all of that. They might not be able to sell much.
Now, probably one of the craziest things, and this is where I'm going to leave everybody, I think, for the day. What the hell is the name of that site? eBay. I'm going to go over to eBay real quick, and I want to show you guys something. 1 by 100. So these are, and I'm going to go into sold to show you guys this as I go and I look at this, and I might have to be signed in order to, I don't know, but shape under blah, 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 options, default, I don't care, free return, sold items. So these little guys right here, right? These are 1 gram by 100 packs. Okay. And each one of them is individually stamped. So you have 1 gram of silver times 100. So they're little breakable, divisible pieces. It's like a, what do you want to call it? Like a end of the day scenario thing where you can break it apart and use it as currency, right? 100 grams equates to a little over 3 ounces of silver, and it's going. So a little over 3 ounces of silver that's individually stamped and broke down into 1 gram pieces is going for being sold at almost $400 right now.
Right.
That's over $100 an ounce.
You do pay a premium on those.
I'm stating this. That's almost $100 an ounce. It's over $100 an ounce what these are going for. And the reason I'm bringing that up, and the reason I'm showing that to people at home, is because that's people's confidence in the US dollar. If people were confident in the US dollar and people didn't think, you'd be paying a slight premium, right? Like if you're buying a round or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you're not. You're paying a huge premium of over $100 an ounce to buy this right now. That's nuts to me. That's insane Tom
Yeah, but
Bum says
if silver's
preppers.
$1,000 an ounce, do you want to go to the grocery store with $1,000 bill?
Well, that's the point. Well, once it's at $1,000 an ounce, what the hell's a freaking gram going to be? You know, it's going to be I mean, right now, like if you were to take this and do the math at that, you're talking like, you know, each one of those little chips, almost $4 a pop at what this guy bought them for. You know,
Yeah.
each one of those little, each gram on that bar, you know, you're looking at each gram on there, almost $4 a pop. In reality, they're worth for what? $2.50, something like that right now. $2, $2.50, something around there. So yeah, it's crazy, man. Closing thoughts on it all for you.
It's going to be a wild ride. 26 is going to be a year to remember. There's going to be a lot of things happening, and I think it's time to like buckle up and get yourself in shape, get your mind in shape, get your soul in shape. Try to take care of your physical needs and prepare for what could be a wild ride, because it's going to be. There's just no doubt.
I think it's going to be a wild ride, and I think that this market right now, what we're seeing is you're seeing accumulation. And I think you're seeing banks that are going to start leveraging what they have. And like you said, they do use it for leverage. Just like a freaking, you know, Elon Musk has a buttload in freaking stocks of Tesla. He doesn't actually have billions of dollars in cash. He's got stock. And he uses that stock in order to take out loans, which are then, basically a huge tax break for him. It's like how he leverages all of that crap. And so banks do the exact same crap with the metal and all that crap that they hold. So it's wild. Yep. So you're right. Not a lot of it can go, but that's why eligible silver, you're only looking at 300 and something million ounces. Eligible.
Which doesn't cover the industrial needs of our 4 biggest users in America for a 3-month period.
300 million ounces. And they just pulled 60. You had a 60% rip out of COMEX, which leaves approximately 50 million ounces available for sale. And if I had those contracts right now, if I actually needed that physical metal, I would be pulling it. And if COMEX defaults, inflation follows. I'm telling you right now, a lot of it. So be prepared. That's all I can say. Be prepared. Like it's going to be a bumpy ride this year. You know, Trump's sitting around, he's preaching that the economy is absolutely amazing and that we're doing great. And people are looking at the oil prices and everything else. But oil prices, I have a feeling that we are suppressing because of the wars with Russia, Iran, and China. China's taking control of the silver market to screw over the US dollar. India tried to collapse the LBMA last month. Not a word out of the United States government about it. It's almost
we're
like
still screwed with rare earths.
Right. It's almost like they want us to believe. And then the one country that we choose to go after, where Christians are being persecuted and murdered, Nigeria, happens to be the country that rejected Elon Musk's lithium offer, has the largest estimated reserve of lithium on the continent of Africa. China took over that mine. Elon Musk got turned down for it. Therefore, U.S. industry wasn't allowed in there. And now we're bombing the crap out of Nigeria because of Christians.
Right. But we don't do it anywhere else.
It's ridiculous.
Funny.
Yeah, we're not doing it with Jelani.
Right. Brought him to the White House.
Yeah, we'll invite his ass in.
He didn't have
Yeah.
Too bad he doesn't have any lithium.
Yeah, if Jelani had lithium, things would be even different, man. We'd have Trump Towers over there already. And I mean, I like Trump. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that he got ahead of this power curve and he's got some plan in place. But I think we're going to see a huge monetary change this next year because of all of this. Because it's not just surface level anymore. It's actually coming out. And I think the moment mainstream media picks up on this, it is going to be the big deal. You know, they want us to focus on illegal immigration and all of the and drugs. And it has nothing to do with any of that. I think illegal immigration crackdown has to do with the amount of terrorists that cross the border underneath Biden. I think that the crackdown on drugs has to do with crushing the IRGC in China and Russia over inside of our hemisphere. You know what I mean? So this is all tied together in what's taking place in the world, and it's a lot of people. But the United States, I don't even think that if we wanted to go to war right now, we could. You know, because of the amount of crap that we have. Obviously, we have our strategic reserves that goes down to ammunition and everything else, but not with Russia, not with China, because we would chew up those munitions too fast, and we don't have the ability to reproduce that many. We sold them all. We got rid of them all over inside of Ukraine, over inside of the Middle East. We've been dropping bombs for 20 plus freaking years on terrorists over in the Middle East. What now? You know, at one point in time, we were, you know what? I can't even say this on air. I can't even say it on air.
Same,
So,
same with shipping. We can only build small boats right now, like Coast Guard cutter size.
right.
And we have one shipyard out east that can do the big ships, but it's like it's doing an aircraft carrier, but it's like it takes them like years and years and years. And they don't have the production. They don't have the they can't ramp up production real quick. There's not trained people for all this stuff in a lot of cases. Yeah, it's a mess. And our government has done this. They've been doing it for a long time. I've been trying to talk to people about it and gotten arrested, fighting the government about it. Globalization is not good for us. It's good for CEOs of multinational corporations. It's good for politicians that have their hand in every cookie jar that ever existed. But it's not good for us. To an extent, sure. We want to be able to people to come for vacation. We want to be able to get a few things from other countries, but we shouldn't have important stuff and be reliant on countries who consider us our enemy and then be reliant on them to continue our civilization, especially when we have the resources here. It's asinine.
Yeah. I'm going to let Castle speak real quick. Raise the hand. It's been a while since I started doing,
I've been yapping. Thanks, Matt. Have a great one.
Brother. Thanks for coming up, man. Appreciate your insight. Castle, what's up?
Hey, Matt. Just wanted to ask first off, is my audio all right? Because I'm speaking at a bit of a distance. Cool. I had a question I wanted to ask. Is this affecting, with what's happening with the silver markets, I just wanted to ask if you could just break it down for me and for those who are listening as to the impacts that this would have, just short summary of the impacts that would have on a macroscopic to microscopic scale, as in like from international to individual, and the sequence of you already explained this. I'm assuming you already explained the sequence of events so far, but as in, say, in 2026, when this is all going to go down, how this would start the cascade, it's from what I'm getting, like a cascade effect.
Yeah.
So that would go through the global economy and, like, say, from international to national to regional to individual. And what we can do to mitigate the impacts that would have on us, especially on individual scale.
Okay, so let's start with the loss of confidence in the U.S. dollar, right, and the euro, right? If the LBMA ends up failing and COMEX ends up failing, which it looks like they both might, like the United States can't bail out COMEX again. So if another large, stand for delivery ends up coming into the LBMA, are they going to default? We've got 50 million ounces left in COMEX. Is it going to default? Are the banks going to resupply it? Are they actually going to take that 300 million ounces and actually put it up for sale, right? From eligible to registered? That's the question. And the question is, at what price? Now that within itself is not going to be horrible if they end up, selling that at a higher price, but eventually the inevitable is probably going to end up happening, which is a default. When that default happens, let's talk industry first. Right? These big industries, your EV industry, the data center industry, like the data center explosion, solar panel industry is huge right now. Like all of these different industries that are absorbing these metals. Well, if they don't have the metal, then they can't work. They might be able to find an alternative, doubtful, which is why they're using this for so long. Defense industry, right? They need they need it in order to produce these things. So could you see lots of people losing their jobs? Yeah, at least temporarily until they end up finding more. But at the same time that those people are losing their jobs, people have lost confidence in the dollar and the euro. So what's going to happen? You start seeing inflation hit. So not only do you have people likely losing jobs, but you also have inflation that's going to end up coming in. And this is just how I see it. I'm not saying that this is an absolute, but this is like a likely scenario, in my opinion, that could happen. And so you're going to start having inflation. So if you make $50,000 a year, now you make $45,000 a year just overnight. If you had a job, you might not right now. You know what I mean? Like you might lose your job, and that inflation, just that little bit, is going to actually start hurting. And then you start looking at how much money the United States government has been printing, right? Just to cover this over the last weekend, 30 something billion, I think, right? That within itself causes more inflation, right? The more the United States government has to print money in order to cover all of these freaking losses, It's a problem. And then we start talking about banks losing money, et cetera. Like, I don't think I can quite predict the chain of events to that extent, because there's so many variables that would jump in place there about whether or not the U.S. government is going to start bailing out some of these companies, whether or not like, who knows? Because that within itself, you got to look at cause and effect. If they're coming in to bail out, that's more money that's being spent, that causes more inflation. That also creates fear and panic. Once that fear and panic sets in, like, so much crap. Look at what happened during the spicy flu, where people were worried about chicken and where their next meal is going to come from, and they ripped the grocery shelves empty, right? Like, we could see something of that nature again.
That was not a fun time, I'll admit. Even in the UK, it was not pretty. Although then again, I just found it ridiculous how people overreacted. But there's actually something I want to bring up, and I'm curious. This has just literally popped into my head midway through you explaining this, that with all these rare earth elements becoming more and more, well, constricted, as the more we extract from Earth, the less we are, finding. And also the more strained it gets internationally, I would say probably this would be the prime time for space extraction of elements, like asteroid mining. Bring a near Earth object into orbit, extract it, bring it back down, and I have no doubt Elon probably has that in mind, because it would seriously destroy the entire market. But if it's already destroyed, then, well, not really losing much if it's already like barely anything there, and then you inflate it with millions of times its current capacity. Well, not capacity, but current extraction rates.
Yeah. And dude, I wish I could predict the actual cost of that and what that would do to the extraction, because absolutely right. Because the point being is that the metal needs to hit the market in order to keep the industry going, and the industry can absorb the cost, but that cost is going to get passed down to the end consumer, which is going to do nothing but drive the price higher. So, like, no matter how you skin this cat and try to solve this equation, the cost of this theoretically would continue to rise as soon as all of these shorts start flipping along, because it's the inevitable deal, because people are going to keep losing money every time spot continues to pull it higher, right? Like, it's just the way it's going to end up happening. So yeah, right now we're sitting at 72.29 for actual spot price, with futures at 71.31. So you still got a dollar spread. Like, it's going to happen. Like, it's going to, they're going to continue to sit here and sell and short, trying to keep this price down for as long as humanly possible. But eventually it's going to have to go back up. It's just consolidation.
Well, yeah, it's due to. And honestly, I'm not talking about just economics here, but I'm also talking like resources, especially with, as you said, like the biggest trading partner with silver being China, which is being cut off, if I'm getting that correct, and also other sources of rare earth elements. That's why I was suggesting, like, I have a pretty big feeling, especially since Elon has put his, how he put SpaceX as a publicly owned entity now rather than private? Yeah, I saw that. He made it public, which is huge. Yeah, he made that public shareholders now have pieces in it, which means people were worried that would cause pauses to the Mars program. But I would say it would probably be primed for things like, as I said, asteroid mining, but also doing, like, one of the big things that they mentioned is putting, data centers in space, like in orbit, by using satellite networks. That's a big thing that was suggested. And think about that. If you have a near-Earth asteroid near there with all the resources available, and then you're going to build it in like these massive data centers in space that would require all those resources, that would basically mean that investors are going to be like, hell yeah, we want to build shit in space now. Right. Excuse my language.
Yeah, but I don't know where that's going to go, man. I used to have decent insight on that. I know they're trying to build them like underwater now and all sorts of crap. They're putting them out in the ocean. They've got them floating like on floating piers, like all sorts of weird crap that they're doing, trying to solve like a huge problem that goes into that. But you're not going to be able to knock any of that out without this. They're not going to be able to do any of it without this metal. And if we go to war, even more of that metal is going to disappear really, really quick. If the U.S. government absorbs it, a lot of it's going to disappear really, really
quick. It would make a monopoly, though.
Yeah. Well, imagine what's going to happen when the U.S. government decides that it needs to start stockpiling this so that this crap can't happen again. Like,
Not going to be pretty.
That's a huge
Imagine
demand
doing
on the market. Huge.
I mean,
demand on
China's
the
already
market.
stockpiling gold.
I'm sorry?
China's already stockpiling gold, as far as I'm aware.
You are correct. China and
And
Russia and India, a lot of countries have been doing it, and they're looking at like, you know, the BRICS currency and saying that we're going to back the BRICS currency by X amount of gold and silver is basically what they're trying to do. And they've actually taken Russia and ran it, and I think it's going to be like a crypto style currency. And because right now Russia and Iran are currently operating on this system to bypass sanctions because they can't do it on SWIFT because the money will get scooped out. So they're doing it on their own little like system. And if that passes, right, if they find that viable, and then BRICS comes online with this currency that the West can't sanction.
Yeah, that's not going to be fun. Basically means we have a massive competitor at that point.
What's that going to do to the US dollar? What's going to happen when China says, you know what, you guys can buy the silver, you guys can import this to the United States, but you got to do it in a BRICS currency? What happens when the Middle East or Saudi Arabia or Egypt, if Egypt says every boat that passes through the Suez Canal has to use a BRICS currency via payment? What happens then to that? Right? Like the war on the dollar is real, and I don't think people realize it. And I think that's going to be the next step, honestly, is that once they get all of that secured, that they're going to start demanding that this trading on this international scale of all of these different critical elements end up taking place underneath this BRICS currency because they're going to dominate the market. And then
yeah, I agree.
Then the US dollar takes a bigger hit. So now you go from 10% inflation to what, 20 plus, maybe 30? Like the dollar is going to crumble is what they're trying to do. They're trying to crumble the dollar.
Pretty sure this happened to the pound before America superseded us, except the pound was, I don't know, was it propped up by the dollar during its very difficult time after World War II? Or World War I as well. Well, not World War I, World War II. I'm not too sure exactly, but the point is, I actually have something which you may find of interest, a book that is relevant to everything which we've discussed today. The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio, if you've ever heard of it.
I have not.
You have? You have not. There's a 40-minute YouTube video which you can watch in your own time. It gives you a short little summary of the book, but doesn't tell the whole thing. But I would really recommend give it a watch, and if you can get the book, get it. It would be quite insightful to understand not only world dynamics and historical projections, etc. Projections of the future based on historical cycles of society, but it would also help us understand on what we can actually do to mitigate such things on, I think, mainly a macroscopic scale, because it almost happened back in the 30s with the the Great Depression, but what was it? FDR managed to reverse that big time, and this is kind of the opportunity where we can either do an FDR or that's it.
Yeah, I think
next person.
Yeah, I think we're going to see the government step in. To be quite honest, I think we're going to see government step in and try to solve this problem, which never works. To be honest, ever. It never turns out good when the governments do that. But dude, I appreciate your insight, man. It's been about 2 hours for me between trying to get the dang streaming software to get fixed and the show itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump off. But I will be back here in just a few hours, right? So I'll be able to see you guys tonight. I appreciate you jumping in and giving your insight as well, my friend. It's good. It's always good to talk to you. It's been a while. It's
been good, Matt. Well, right. You have a good one, and I'll see you around soon. Thanks again for speaking the truth, and you have a good day, and everyone else have a good day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world. Catch you around.
Take care, brother. Cheers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to end up doing it for me today. It is. And I hope by giving you guys at least enough information to understand what the heck is going on in this world and why all of these different things are happening. It is just inevitable circumstance to take place. That's what it is. So I appreciate you guys for joining me. I appreciate you guys for stopping in. I love every single one of you, everybody that ended up donating today, whether it be Speak the Truth memberships or just coming in super chats. I really appreciate you. Last one, Con ended up saying, Matt, did you see BlackRock Silver invested 15 million of their own stock into a mine in Nevada last week? No, I did not. but that might not be a bad idea to follow that money. I know, your mining stocks and stuff like that have also gone up significantly this year if they're attached to this madness that's on your screen. So if you're paying attention, mining stocks are going up as well, which is another way that you could turn around and invest in it. But the big thing that I guess all the preppers are screaming like at the top of their lungs is that's a stock and you're only going to get fiat for it in return. You're not actually getting a physical metal, which is what the actual value ends up being. So take everything with a grain of salt that ended up coming out here. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an investor, but I'm not any of that crap. If you listen to any of this crap and choose to do it, you're doing it at your own risk. I didn't tell you to do this. I won't tell you to do this. You guys do what you will. All right. I'm just here giving you information as I know it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. Peace, love, happiness, and God bless. I'm out of here.